there are two characters in this novel that have a romantic relationship, Kamal and Saida, and they are ethnic opposites of each other. In a different way, in a way that the two romantic characters in the in-between world of Vikram Lal are also ethnic opposites of each other. Except Kamal in this novel is a, do you say Chotara? Chotara. We say, you know what we say in Trinidad? That's right. We say Dogla in Trinidad. A black and an Indian, we say Dogla. Can you tell us a little bit about why you write so often about these characters, the two romantic figures that they come from different ethnic backgrounds? And do you say it again?
Chotara.
Chotara. And I miss Chotara, that's right, Chotara.
It's hard to say why one does certain things, but it's a fascination for me. It allows me to explore certain aspects of character and personality and history, I suppose. And this type of romantic relationship was beginning. Of course, it happened in the past when the Indians first came and the wives were not there. So whether you call them romantic or whether you call them concubine or whatever. But I refuse to believe it was just an exploitative relationship with the master. But when I was growing up, then this relationship started again. My generation became educated, and people were beginning to accept that. But then other changes happened, political, and people left. But I find it fascinating just to see how people would react, and to bring out a certain very visceral attitudes that also exist to racism, basically, or insecurity, racial insecurity, or ethnic insecurity that people had, that come out in terms of spontaneous anger or even hatred. But it's never completely clear. As I said in the past, there were relationships, and there were Indians who were hanged by the Germans for assisting the revolutionaries or insurrectionists, whatever you call them. So, it is more complex than it seems, but there was obviously an amount of racism that existed. What we didn't realize was, of course, racism goes both ways. It was not that the Africans were just waiting to get married to Indians. I mean, they also had very long and established cultures that would have resisted that anyway. So that just allows me to look at that. But exactly, I don't make a conscious decision.
Well, it's the material you have.
The material I have, I wanted to also explore Swahili culture.
Yeah.
In the midst of which I grew up. When I was going to go to school, we used to walk to school a long way, and on the way you would hear this poetry on the radio. So this is a kind of part of my upbringing. So it allows me to, but I couldn't take a completely Swahili character.
Yeah. The thing about Kamal, the relationship he had with his mother, I thought was so warm, was so beautiful. I could not understand. Maybe you will help me to do this now. Why she was willing to give him up so absolutely, so absolutely.
But the reason I thought the reason that made sense to me why a mother would do that was
no, but I mean it made sense in the novel. I'm not saying it didn't.
Oh.
It just pained that.
Yeah, it was very painful.
Yeah.
I think.
Because it pained me because you had given us so well this picture of this mother and the son. Could you just let them know who the mother was, who the father was, and the son, who the mother of this boy?
But the mother is a descendant of slaves. And people forget that slave traders and owners also either from the same tribe or other tribes or Arabs or Indians. So it was a kind of, it was not just black versus white or brown versus white. A person could be captured by his own people if he didn't have his own family and would just be sold. So it is a complex thing. But she was from slave background and she was embarrassed about it.
But she's a black African.
She she's a black African, but there's a hint that there was perhaps there was an Indian ancestor.
Right.
But it's not completely clear. But she's a very strong woman, and like many widows who bring up, my own mother was like that, perhaps I do from her. A woman who's a widow brings up children. It's a very male-dominated world. It's a very strong character.
But then,
And then the relationship and the humor and it's all there. I guess I would do it from what I understood of my mother.
yeah, but what did she want for her son?
She wanted the best, right? I mean,
No, but the father of her son was Indian.
But the father had abandoned her.
But he was Indian, and that was.
He was Indian and he had abandoned her.
And she.
Gone to India and just become an ordinary Indian. He went back. He was a doctor, so when Kamal finally went to that place to become his father, just to see what happened. The father was a doctor who was known in his hometown, who had done charitable work, but he had completely abandoned his son, except that he left relations who looked after the son.
Yeah, but I guess I'm trying to press you on what struck me, what really engrossed me in this novel, and I'm just grappling with it. It's that she gave him over to his father's family. I know you say why in the novel, but could you just tell us why does she give him over to the father's family?
So it seemed to her and to me the only way he would be successful. I'm not clear at the end, he's not sure. When
Yeah,
he goes
I'm
back
going
and
to ask that question.
starts reflecting about it, what does it mean?
Mhm.
Did I just statistically gain 20 years because life expectancy in Tanzania even now is 55 years? So, did I just go there to gain 20 years? I mean, what is happiness? What is fulfillment in life? So he does ask that, but for her, for him to be successful, he had to be brought up in the city.
As an Indian,
As an
that
Indian.
was the thing that was striking me all the time, that for her, it is important for her that he almost forgets his, totally eradicates his black roots, and she wants him to identify with as an Indian and forget everything
Yeah,
else.
because she will always remind him that your father's ancestors are.
That's right.
And she made up stories about them. She said there were ambassadors and kings and
Of course, you know kind of why I'm pressing you on that is because I'm from Trinidad, and Trinidad and Guyana, we grapple with these very same, I just told my students I hate them using the word issues, and I'm about to say we grapple with the same issues. I know that word right, but okay, so I'm going to leave that and say to you what you sort of brought up a little bit. You question all the time the value of that delving into the past. And Kamal says, at one point Kamal says, do we owe anything to the past? And then he says, a silly question. The past is over. And then he asks another one, or a profound one. And then he says, we are part of continuity. And our publisher narrator has an answer. He says, the past is important if it's interesting and you have made it so. Can you explain that?
seems clear cut.
Okay, but yes, but could you just, what were they, okay then.
I think basically I was trying to, when you write about the past or when you talk about it, especially when you're living here, and people say, what's the point? It's finished.
Yeah.
But it's not finished. There's so many novels just coming out about the past. 500 novels about the First World War. But especially coming from our culture, people say, what's the point? Even if it's the only novel you write about the subject. So it was a kind of self-questioning and then answering that it's important. Of course, it's important in other ways too, which I wouldn't get into the book. That it's important for us to know who we are. Because we've been brought up and we live in a world where we know who everybody else is. I was reading a statistic a couple of last year or year before from UNESCO about the number of books published. In the United States was per year, 100,000 or something. In UK it was about 100,000 or something, a big number. In Tanzania it was 150. So it's a question of self-knowledge. If you don't write, and when I go there and I speak to students, if I get a chance, I tell them that, that if you don't tell your stories, then the world will tell your stories. And you know what stories the world will tell? Africa is AIDS, war, and hunger. Is that what you want? And that shocks them, because that's what the real subject is. But in terms of writer's obsession, you have to deal with it differently. The past is important because of continuity, because we are part of a larger world, and then you let it go.
You do, like you give us I mean, when you read this novel, you get so much historical background. It's just absolutely wonderful. But I'm going to ask you a question that probably touches a little bit on your personal life, perhaps, or not. Because over and over again, the Kamal is living in Canada, and he comes back. At the beginning of the novel, he comes back to East Africa. And over again, you have him, he's asking and wondering what's gained or what's lost in leaving his home, which is a question, I guess, a lot of immigrants ask too. He's a successful doctor in Canada, but he wonders, and he then makes this jump, wondering about the American Idol, Madonna's adopted an African child. And he says, surely he will do well.
It's a question, right? You know, when a child is adopted and brought here, you think a lot of them will do well.
But Kamal is asking.
But he's asking, yeah.
But
at the same time, you ask yourself, is this what we are that we have to be taken away from?
Yeah.
Who we are and where we come from, to another place, just to survive? That's the question he's asking.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the answer
And the
we
price.
give frequently to say, but he'll do well. Madonna's son, hopefully she sends him to a good school. But and he'll do well.
But I think he's also asking that question for himself.
He's for himself, yeah.
Here he is. He left what his mother wanted him to be. He's gone to Canada. He's a very successful doctor. He has everything. He has a beautiful wife. I don't think we have another question about the wife. And the children, which is also going back to the racial thing, the children don't like him, or the wife doesn't. They don't like.
Yes, and the racism comes in
the
strong.
children, the wife nor the children want Kamal to talk about his African, his black African side. You know, you're an Indian. What are you bringing all of this stuff up on? But here he seems to have had everything in Canada, and he's asking the question at that point in his life that I think successful immigrants do ask.
Or even non-immigrants, people at a certain age do ask.
Yeah. You know,
what's it
leaving
about?
leaving your home. It's
Yeah.
leaving your home.
Well, many don't, because I meet people who just would never, at least outwardly, ask that question because they say, where do you well? And you know, who's to question that? But there are some, I always ask because I feel a continuity to my African roots and to my Indian roots, and then I think of these other questions. I think for a writer, for a novelist, these questions are very important. Many novelists in fact do go back in their imagination to the places they come from, just to bring them back and to explore what was left unexplored and so on. It's very common. But in the lives of many immigrants, there's a denial, and maybe it's honest denial, I don't know, but it's not a denial I personally accept. Because when I go to Tanzania, as soon as I pass immigration, I feel that I'm back.
But he feels a sense of loss. That in spite of having this, he didn't, I mean, it's almost like, it's an illusion, this thing that he has. He has the practices, he has the money, he has the beautiful wife, he has the successful children, and it's almost like he's saying,
Was he left? I've dramatized it. In the novel, of course, the situation is dramatized
right,
by the fact that he left his girl behind.
yeah,
And the question of his mother is unresolved.
that's right.
So he has, and when I was writing the novel, I thought maybe after 35 years he goes back, who does that? And then I came across people who are actually doing it. You know, especially with the internet, they drink it more. You know, like, you know, looking up some, especially it's a man-woman thing. The guy looks up a girl he's known in university. 40 years ago, and things like that do happen. But when I was beginning to write the novel, maybe I'm stretching it, but maybe this guy's an exceptional guy.
It was very believable, except for one little thing. But I want to talk about Saida and Kamal just pressing this thing again. You also make some harsh indictments in this novel of the broken promises of independent Africa. And you say the narrator wonders if his country has not become, I thought this was fascinating, has not become, quote, an Oliver Twist nation, colon. So, can I have some money? And later you speak of the, quote, outstretched hand of Africa. Can you tell us a little bit more about this state of affairs for African countries? Because this is kind of...
Well, especially East African countries, Tanzania, that I know about. There's a complete dependence on foreign aid.
Yeah.
When
So
I go to
really
Dar es
all
Salaam,
of it.
I find it impossible to meet someone who leads a decent life, who does not depend on some kind of foreign, through an NGO or whatever. It's like a new kind of colonization that has taken place. And the cost of living becomes very high because you sort of now keep up with the foreign NGOs. Everything in the city is expensive and available. You go to the villages and there's no electricity. 85% or more of Tanzania is in darkness at night. So,
How do you account for this?
it's corruption, people not caring.
Or why the corruption?
Greed. I mean, just people
Why
just
is
keep
it-
money for themselves, right? They don't want to do it for their own countries, and they depend on foreigners to come and help them. And the foreigners, of course, I wonder, it's just altruism, it's just the way to live in Africa, the warm sunshine with the white SUV, and living like a boss. So it's both. People mean well when they give money, but it creates, I personally think, a terrible dependence. It's such a dependence that it's almost impossible to break out of. The whole economy, the economy of a city is based on the presence of foreigners who bring money and millions of dollars.
Do you think this has anything to do with the legacy of colonialism?
I personally don't think so.
Yeah, that's not what.
I mean, indirectly everything is related to everything else, but it's just, and I was struck by, I put in here an incident with mosquito nets,
Yeah.
which is based on a real situation. When the president of Tanzania in some conference in Singapore or somewhere basically said, we are so poor we cannot afford mosquito nets. And that's baloney. And so some Sharon Stone or someone said, I will donate. And can you imagine how embarrassing this is? But there are millionaires there who can just, people do it here. We give money to charity here. Why not these millionaires, millions of dollars in their bank accounts? Why can't they donate? It has to come from outside. Mosquito nets.
That is some indictment.
I think I personally, and it's embarrassing.
It's very much in the novel. Very much in the novel. He doesn't shy away. Okay, I'm going to get to a little better things. About Kamal and Saida. Here's a question that kept puzzling me as I was reading this. Okay, so Kamal comes back after many, many years. You say 35 years. He's a very successful doctor. And he comes back looking for Saida. And his last contact with her, she was about 10 or 11.
I think a little older. He met her briefly for a few days.
He met her again briefly in high school, but the spark happened there. So I wondered, why did he wait so long to go searching for her?
He was a kid.
Well, yes, I know he's a kid. I know he's a kid, but that's the thing that I kept thinking about. Okay, so when he was in high school, he had a chance. He could have.
He couldn't because, we just didn't, high school just take a bus and go off to another town. It just didn't happen.
Okay,
I
well,
left
what about
Dar es Salaam
before
the
he
first
left?
time when I was in high school. I finished high school.
Well, before he left for university, if he had
Then
his
he
luck-
went. Then he went. Before he left for university, that's when he promised to come back. And of course, by that time, she was married.
Yeah,
To a magician.
she might have been married, but
But he did promise to come back, and then he
they
did
didn't
come
stop
back.
them from
Yeah.
having.
But there was a lot of difference now, right? He was successful in school, he was accepted in university.
But you
But
asked,
even then, in his basically youthful idealism, he said, I'll come back.
so
He
that's
does.
what I want to know. He seems to have carried this love.
I think he was a coward like most of us are. I'm talking about myself. I dreamed of going back very often when I was in university here. Plus,
But
of
he
course,
had a
then Idi
motive.
Amin. But then, of course, Idi Amin happened, right? And the whole sort of people left, and he thought I'll go and come back, and it hasn't.
Okay, but it had an effect on her.
Oh yeah.
That
She comes looking for him.
Yeah, it had an effect on her. You don't want to tell them this. Okay. But it had a huge effect on her that he does not. I mean, I have the same thing with the mother, you know. I have, you set up to me, you're saying something that I guess as a woman I'm having a take on your novel as from a woman's perspective, and I think that this novel is very much a man's perspective. This novel is very much that. Meaning that I just can't, I mean, you set up so beautifully the love between this mother and this son, how much he loves her. And then you set up so beautifully this love between these two young people. And then they don't seem to have the, what prevents them from the drive from coming back, finding each other? What?
See, for him, she was impossible.
But you said college.
She was married. It was all powers. He
Is
was
it
doing
because-
well. They quickly got married, got trapped into a marriage, sort of, and their children, and then this rat race of bringing up children and doing well. But his mother, I think, but in my mind, he couldn't forgive her for
Yes, right.
for just giving him away.
But in my
She
mind,
had married-
she would have given him up, that she had to see him. You see, and I think that that's what
But she would marry him, and the
You
women
know.
did that. When I was growing up, among Indian families especially, if a woman remarried, she gave up her children. And then the children would not meet their mother until, I know of a case where they met in Canada, 50 years or whatever, 40 years. So in Indian families it happened.
You know, I hadn't thought about this before until we just sitting down here. Because I never thought that you could make a case for a woman's perspective, a woman's perspective in a novel. But when I look at this and I think of, when I read the novel twice, and I'm reading the novel, and as a woman I'm saying, no, there is no way. And then as a woman I'm saying, but you make Saida do exactly what a woman would do. She carries this as a stone in her heart, that it breaks her. But he seems to go on with his life. He goes to university, he marries,
You know what life
he
is
becomes
like.
a successful
You
doctor.
step on the
And
treadmill
then,
and you go.
35 years later, he says, my God, what I gave up. Okay, all right.
Excuse me, but that happens in life and has happened in a lot of situations, not just Indians and Africans.
I know.
I mean, historically it happened in India with British men who married Indian wives and took their children away and sent them to England.
But you see, that's what I'm talking about, is the
Englishmen.
men seem capable of doing that. And the women seem to carry this emotional thing with them, and it just, he does this beautifully with the magic of
But the
Saida.
women gave up their children when there was this, when it was a question of giving and having your child be successful.
I know.
If you can't offer that as a mother to your child,
Yeah.
and you want the best for your child, happened in India all the
It's
time.
a sacrifice, actually.
It's a sacrifice, it's a huge sacrifice.
I actually am not talking, I'm not arguing too much about, but not arguing is the wrong word. I'm not saying so much that you don't give it up, because, you know, God knows I blame my poor mother my whole life. And in her mind, when I got a scholarship to go to university in Wisconsin, in her mind, this was a wonderful opportunity for me. In my mind is, you gave me up. You know? Why don't you ask me to come home? And even after I graduated, oh, go on to school again. You know? And then even I'd go on, do more. And then I marry an American, wonderful, go on. And in my mind, yeah, go on, but how come you don't want me back? So I do understand that. And I'm saying that for me, in the novel, he allowed, from a woman's perspective, the woman does pain him, feel the pain of it. I just can't understand how the man is able not to carry this pain until one day he wakes up and he says, what's it all about? Why do I have all of this? And he goes looking for Saida. So that's the part I mean. What's the difference? You know, you never hear of the woman then continuing on to go to medical school. I mean, she had enough, she was doing something. She had a Saida. I mean,
Saida herself or her mother?
no, she too. I mean, she could
Saida,
have.
of course, but she was doing
But whatever, in her life, it was something.
Yeah, but she had, you know, like many girls in such situations, she had such talent that was untapped.
Yeah.
And he realizes that he's jealous and so on.
I think that was very heartbreaking. You also have an Englishman, Markham, in there. Could you tell us a little bit about him? And why, I can't ask you why, I wouldn't ask about your why they put the, but sort of how he plays into the story.
I think when you go to, especially I think 15, 20 years ago, if you went back to Tanzania and Dar es Salaam, you would see these people from colonial times who just cannot let go. Africa is in their bones. And even if they were little, they are the children of people who served in the colonies. And they can't let go, you see that. And he's, I guess, one of those, he's older, but I've seen younger people who keep coming back. He's older who just never left. In fact, there are people, running little bed and breakfast in the Kilimanjaro, people who just, people who go to Africa, just gets to them. He's one of those who just, he has nothing to go back to. When you're there, you're not scared. It's only here that people scare you about this disease and that disease, and, but once you step off the plane,